Welcome back to the Backwards History Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Will, here with my co-host, Kevin. Say hi, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Shut up, Kevin.
You can't talk to me like that. I have rights.
Rights?
Rights, you know.
But we have these unelected officials that like to, dictate what you're allowed to do with your rights.
That doesn't sound constitutional.
But you're a felon today when you weren't a felon for doing what you just did yesterday. That's how things go now.
That doesn't sound right.
Doesn't it?
No, not really, no.
There's some alphabet boys that think it is.
Alphabet boys.
Well, before we get into what we mean there, we want you to go do those social media thingy things. Go like, share, subscribe. Go support your boys at our Teespring at teespring.com/stores/backwards-history-store. Go pick you up a hoodie. Go pick you up a mask that says, "Shut up, Kevin," because that's my favorite part of the podcast. It should be yours, too.
It's a pretty good
one. But in all seriousness, I guess you can, well, those of you in the know, or those of you that have, smelled what we're stepping in, probably understand what we're talking about here. There is a particular government agency filled with unelected officials that get to change their mind on an almost daily basis, monthly basis, yearly basis, whatever, depending on the subject, on what is legal for a citizen to own in regards to a particular, as of yet, legally owned item, i.e. firearms and their particular additions per the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Well, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, as they've more recently been turned to. Recently, I mean within the last 20 years. The ATF, if you don't know, gets to participate in a practice called lawmaking or opinion having, I guess is lack of a real word term, where they get to say, okay, well, this attachment now needs to be regulated, and you need to register your firearm if you have said attachment or not, and you can use this attachment in this manner or this manner, and this manner is legal, this one's not, but they're able to change their mind on a regular basis. Case in point, within the last few months prior to the election, they decided that the pistol braces used on AK pistols or AR pistols or pistol caliber carbines and the like, they decided that they are possibly going to be classified under what they call any other weapon, which is the AR-15, for example. If it's under 16 inches, if the barrel is under 16 inches, then it is a short-barreled rifle if it has a rifle stock on it. But if it has a, air quotes, pistol brace, which all intended purposes is a rifle stock, but with a Velcro strap to where you could strap it to your arm to be fired with one hand, it's suddenly a pistol, or it's any other weapon, or it's an SBR, otherwise known as a short-barreled rifle. Now, anyone who knows what I'm talking about will know that several years back, we were told that if you put said stock or air quotes, pistol brace to your shoulder, you're suddenly committing a felony. Because you've now taken a weapon that was designed, air quotes. This is going to be full of air quotes. And I'll get to the reason why here in a second. If you shoulder said weapon, you've suddenly manufactured a short-barreled rifle because you've changed the intent of the attachment. And then 6 months later, they put out a letter that clarified, saying if you were to occasionally shoulder the weapon, then it is not manufacturing a weapon. I couldn't understand why. I couldn't imagine why you would think that just the way you handle a weapon would manufacture, air quotes, a different function, because that's not the meaning of the word. But I say all this to illustrate the irregularity of opinion. One day, something you own is legal. One day, some way you use something you own is legal. The next day, the thing you own is illegal, or the way you handle the thing you own is illegal. All of this being done by an unelected set of individuals. They get to operate at will, at their own will, because not even the head of their organization or their department, being the Department of Justice, which previously the ATF belonged to the Department of the Treasury, they get to decide what's illegal and what's not without due process of law, without equal protection under the law, because they don't lay out any real checklist for law-abiding individuals to follow. So how can you make sure you're abiding by the letter of the law when there is no letter of the law and it's all how they feel that day? Which brings me to the main point. The ATF is an unconstitutional entity. They basically primarily police three legally owned items. But it seems like the ATF piecemeal is trying to make everything you own as a firearm owner illegal, especially if this country comes under a Biden-Harris rule. Administration? Oh, I'm sorry. That's the more appropriate term.
Might be a little easier to digest.
Right. And it's easier to take things one piece at a time than it is to full out say, oh, you have no Second Amendment rights. We're just going to take it all today. It's like the frog in the slowly boiling pot. This wouldn't be the first time that pieces of things were taken, pieces and pieces and pieces, or, suddenly you're the bad guy when you were just fine the day prior. And we have someone who's got a little background on that. Luckily, we've got a resident historian here. Kevin?
Thank you, Will. Now, when Will came to me earlier in the week about this episode, it was a bit of a struggle to kind of, find the way I wanted to present this in a historical context, because you always have your big ones, You always have, episodes we've done before about the brown shirts, the Nazis, this, that, and the third about gun control, and, the big ones that people always seem to refer to without any really good context.
American connotation usually points to Lexington and Concord.
Exactly.
Which we've mentioned a couple times. Several times.
You're right. But for this one, I wanted to find a more subtle, a more individual, story or, scene, if you will, of how, from one day to the next, things can change. And even though you as an individual didn't do anything wrong, all of a sudden you're the bad guy because something changed beyond your control. Recently, I read Brad Meltzer's book, The First Conspiracy, which discusses a plot to kidnap George Washington during the Revolutionary War. In the book, you're introduced to a gunsmith by the name of Gilbert Forbes. Now, back in the day, before you had mass production or assembly lines, you had people who specialized in gunsmithing. It was a relatively sought after skill. Not everybody was able to do it. And Gilbert Smith was, by all accounts, on paper, a law-abiding citizen. He owned a business. He provided a service. He made a living. He paid his taxes. He went about his business. Well, you fast forward to the very early days of the Revolutionary War. Gilbert Forbes lives in New York. The governor of New York, Tyrann Mathieu, he's a very strong British loyalist. He's
otherwise known as a Tory.
He, all the way British. Well, during that time, George Washington comes to town, quite literally, with his army.
Says, we don't like that much around here, boy.
Exactly. So him and the governor of New York are, kind of bumping heads. Hey, Washington's here with his armed forces. On paper are, by definition, traitors to the crown.
Terrorist, if you will.
Terrorist by modern standards, yes. So the governor of the New York colony is like, hey, I got to do something. I got this rebel uprising, if you will. So he starts, trying to recruit more loyalists to the cause. And if you have bodies, but you need them to have weapons, right? So he enlists a gunsmith like Gilbert Forbes. He comes to him, hey, I am a duly elected representative of the colony of New York by the British Crown. I want to pay you for these firearms and enlist you in service to the crown. Which, on legal terms, he has every right to do.
He is doing illegal action while Washington and his men are the illegal entity.
Right. On paper now, let's remove our emotions from it for a moment. Washington and his men, technically traitors, they're rebels. The governor of New York, he's doing what he put in place to do, which is, serves the crown. So Gilbert Forbes, he's approached by a representative of the governor of New York, and he's like, hey, we're going to pay you above price for these firearms. Gilbert Forbes like, hey, this is like a pretty good deal. This is the job I've done. This is the skill I have. So if you look at it by perspective, the rebels or the Continentals, Gilbert Forbes is a traitor, but all he's really doing is his trade, his skill.
He's conducting business.
He's trying to continue his lifestyle. He's trying to make a living. He's not really, he hasn't done anything that would constitute a treacherous act, at least not on paper. Mm-hmm. And so it's quite compelling. Like, one day you're just a gunsmith, and next day you get approached like, hey, you want to make some money by selling some guns like you've been doing. All of a sudden you're a fucking traitor. Pardon the French there.
I'm gonna leave it.
All of a sudden you're a traitor, but all you've done is the same business you've been doing. And it's one of those things where on an individual level, it's like you haven't done anything different. You're still living your life. You're still, earning the means.
Mm-hmm.
You're still, member of the community. You're living your life. You're doing the best you can, and circumstances change beyond your control, and all of a sudden you're viewed in a different light because someone decided that what you were doing is wrong, and you had no say in the matter.
And that's what irritates me the most about the situation. I'm going to be a little selfish here in this statement. That's what I find most irritating about the situation I find myself in. It's almost like the feds, at least the ATF, knew the fix was in on this election. If there is a fix, which, given the fact that, once Dominion voting machines came in question, the Dominion offices in multiple locations suddenly came up empty and moved to somewhere else. Subject for another episode. But the ATF, just a few months before election, started doing things contrary to executive order issued by President Trump, barring them from making rulings of this nature. Which, you would think he's still the president till January 20th at noon, so his executive order still stands, so why would you be emboldened as a federal agency to go against said executive order if you didn't already know that things would be changing at the given election? It's one thing to bet that they would change, it's another thing to really put skin in the game. Because what happens, they do that, and then come, December 6th, Trump's still president, you just crap the bed if you're the agency leaders. But they've already been in talks with the quote-unquote, air quotes, President-elect Biden transition team, because there is no president-elect at this point, because the election hasn't taken place. Because the true election is December 6th. Exactly. Last episode, go back and listen if you haven't heard it.
Catch up with us now.
But if you go to Biden's website, which I encourage you to do, go see word for word what his website says their gun control plan is going to be. Me, as an individual who is of low-level middle class, like at the lower limits of middle class, I will not be able to afford to register all of my, air quotes again, high capacity magazines, which I bought with the weapons that I have. They are standard capacity magazines.
Same.
Either I pay a tax stamp for every single magazine and then every single weapon that falls under a certain criteria, or I turn them in, or I commit multiple felonies. It sounds like a crap situation for me because neither can I afford, without great effort and great suffering from my family, to register all of these items at once. Nor do I want to be a felon, because I could lose my job.
Comes with quite a few. Yeah.
Or I give up my Second Amendment rights, which anybody who's a listener of the podcast knows that I am very, very much a huge fan of my rights, most specifically my Second Amendment rights. But, the day before whatever executive orders are signed in the first 100 days of a presidency, which, because we know that's the most work anybody ever puts in as a president.
Historically speaking, yeah.
One day I could be a law-abiding citizen, and the next day I can either be a poor man, a disenfranchised man, or a felon. And those could be 24 hours removed from each other. Those two statuses. and I haven't done anything wrong.
Yeah, you literally went to bed one day and woke up the next.
And I'm being punished for the actions of actual criminals. I'm being made a criminal because of the actions of actual criminals. And I haven't done anything. My weapons haven't harmed a soul. The only thing that is hurt because of my weapons is my wallet, and that's because ammo prices have gone through the roof.
Oh, preach, fella.
And I don't think that's okay.
No.
You have to register your if the shoe was on a different foot, and someone told you you need to go through universal background check, you need to register your account on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter with the government. You have to register your pen and paper if you're a journalist that actually writes stuff. Would anybody be okay with that?
Going old school.
You turn in your cell phone that does anything more than make phone calls. If you want to get on Facebook, you either turn it in or you pay a tax stamp for your right to semi-automatic word publishing. There you go. You have to go through a special licensing process to be able to post a tweet of more than 10 words. I mean, somebody's got to be smelling when I'm stepping in.
Right. Any
restriction on the Second Amendment, if it doesn't make sense to the other amendments, then it doesn't make sense to the Second Amendment. You only have the right to against unlawful search and seizure past the 10th item. Right.
After 10, we got you.
Right. Or you have the right not to incriminate yourself only past the 10th question. You have the right against having a government official live in your home only past the 10th person. That's the Third Amendment for those of you unaware.
The one that doesn't get a lot of attention.
Right. You only have the right against, the cruel and unusual punishment past the 10th instance of cruel and unusual punishment. Does it make any sense to anything else? Then why does it make sense to the Second Amendment?
It makes people feel safe.
The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I don't understand how hard that is to understand. If you want to change it, amend it the way that it's supposed to be done. But even still, I'm not going to comply.
Fair.
Period.
Done. I mean, the fact that I was able to go today and purchase a firearm legally because I exercised my rights as a U.S. citizen. The fact that in a few months that process could be, considerably more difficult or almost impossible is a very real possibility.
And that's terrifying.
It is. I know in a lot of election cycles, people are like, well, those are just campaign promises. That's just politicians trying to appease to the lowest common denominator and this other. But we should look at this as a politician saying he's going to do it, or he, she, they, whatever. Let's, be alert of like what they're saying. Let's just that's just campaign jargon.
But he's certainly stacking the deck in the favor of it. He's got Beto. Hell yes, we're gonna take your AR-15s and AK-47 as his right, as his gun controls are. He's got Kamala Harris as his VP. His chief of staff is already talking about, air quotes again, mandatory buybacks, aka a nice way to say forced confiscation.
We're going to take your tax money and buy your guns back.
You cannot buy back what you never owned to begin with. I did not buy. Sure, they can buy back every one of my guns that I bought from the federal government. That'd be a big fat zero.
Right.
You can't buy back what you never owned to begin with.
That reminds me, I saw this meme on Facebook. It had like Batman and Kamala Harris, like, who would you rather get caught with an eighth of a gram of cocaine? Yeah, I'm not much for like political satire or whatever, but that one just really stuck with me. Like, and that didn't really drive the point home. And most people chose Batman, in case you were wondering.
Well, I saw one earlier tonight. It was pretty funny. It was a kid sitting on Santa's lap, and she asked for a dinosaur for Christmas, and Santa was like, "Okay, be realistic." She's like, "Well, I'd like for liberals to stop trying to have gun control." He's like, "Okay, what color do you want your dinosaur or your dragon?"
Dragon,
yeah. So, I feel like most of it's just out of feelings, because none of the things that they want to claim makes a weapon worse. Like right now, it's bumps, or it's pistol braces. Yesterday it was bump stocks after Las Vegas shooting. Tomorrow, or it's in the 93 crime bill or 93 assault weapons ban that Joe Biden was a co-author on. It was foregrips and adjustable stocks and things of that nature. Literally, the only two things that those attachments that were illegal on the AR-15 under that were matters of convenience or aesthetics.
Right.
Literally, none of them affected the function of the weapon.
Right.
They were all feel-good measures. It made it look scary. So if it don't look so scary, I won't be skirted, so I'll feel safer. And it had a sunset clause, because if there was no significant effect measurable by its enactment, it would go away. And it went away because there was none. It says something.
Right.
It says something that went away because there was nothing.
Nada. Some people's kids.
When did we become the country of the feels? When do we become the country that is dictated by boo-hoo, I want it gone because I want it gone, not because I want it gone because there's an actual, real, legitimate reason?
An emotional-based logic.
To quote one of my favorite YouTubers on our way out on this episode, before we go into our own tagline, surrounded by a pile of hot brass from my cold dead hands. Thank you, Johnny B. If you haven't seen him, look him up on YouTube. Johnny B. He's a fun 2A guy. But as always, we don't want you to see us as experts. We don't want you to take anything we say as fact. We want you to do your own research, form your own opinions, trust, but verify.